Hi, I'm Michael Allison. I'm the Commercial Director at Roma Finance, and welcome to another edition of RomaTalks, where I'm joined from people from across the property spectra. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Jay and Piotr from Howard Auction and Auction Buyers Club. Hello.
Thank you for having us, Michael.
Oh, you're welcome. We don't normally have two guests, so I'm not sure which way to look, so you have to bear with me on
Look
this.
at everyone's favourite, Piotr. Just you keep your eyes on him and this will be a good chat.
We'll look at Piotr and listen to Jay.
Yeah.
How about that? That's what people normally do. So, listen, before we go any further, we've got people who's watching who may not know who you guys are or what you do. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourselves?
Wow. Okay, Piotr goes first.
Okay, nice. So, my name's Piotr, and business partners together with Jay. We basically buy and sell properties in auctions. We do it for clients as well under the Howard Auctions brand, and we help people buy properties as well for the Auction Buyers Club. And I think on LinkedIn there's been a highlight that I've been in with Howard for 11 years. 11 years and 13 years in property in general. So quite a while now. And we love auctions, basically. You love to land, we love auctions.
What about yourself, Jay?
So I'm business partners with Piotr, as he says. I've been in property since 2002. I was working for a family office. Took that from the portion I was managing, 2.7 billion to 3.3 billion through asset management and acquisition. Then burnt out, as most people do. I was earning far too much money at the age of 20 or whatever it was. And then kind of thought, well, I need to take a break. I went into financial services, which was not the move for me. And then clawed my way back into property by starting working at an auction company. I started off as an administrator, and within 6 to 9 months, I was the manager. Then I was head of auctions, and I did that for 7 years and kind of grew that business. And then we wrote the book together, Before the Hammer Falls, which is now in its 2nd edition. And that seems to be going better than we hoped, which is good. We generally have high expectations of the stuff that we put out, but it seems to be going well. And everything that we do is based around how to make the best of a difficult situation. And auctions are resplendent with difficult situations. And that's kind of where we kind of put our flag. That's where we climbed that mountain and said, we're the kings of this castle.
Going to have a go.
Give it a go.
We're not going to walk past the book. I think we're going to circle back round because I don't have many published authors on
Twice
the
published authors.
Twice published authors, obviously. The link in the bio below, obviously. But we don't see. But let's start first of all. Auction. It's almost a why auction because it's not always had the best reputation, has it historically? For disposing of assets, or
recent history, but historically, you go back 300-400 years, it was the main way to transact in real estate in the UK, France, and other parts of Europe. It is the originator of property transactions.
And also, once you go auctions, you can't go back.
There's no going back.
It's literally so addictive. And the fact that you get to work with people who are committed, they need to put down the deposit, they need to make decisions. It's not just talk, and it's not just like making offers and they taking 9 months to proceed with something. It's like
no chains, no chain breaks, no final minute chipping of the price, none of the pain and aggravation you expect to find in the market. You find other pains and aggravations at the auctions. We're not going to pretend that doesn't happen, but not those ones. Have you read the book, The Marshmallow Test?
I haven't.
You know the marshmallow test? So the marshmallow test was a psychological test where they'd stick a kid in a room and they would put on a plate in front of them a marshmallow. And they'd say, I'm coming right back. Don't eat the marshmallow. And when I come back, I will give you another marshmallow. So there'll be 2 marshmallows, not 1. They go out, and then it's an indeterminable length of time. And sooner or later, that kid is going to go over, reach over and gobble that marshmallow. And I always say, myself and Piotr, the type that before someone's even left the room, the marshmallow's in. And we're smiling, we couldn't be happier. The instant gratification of going to an auction, the hammer going down and that property being yours, and the strength of that contract, how that works, is not repeatable in any way, shape or form, anywhere else in the market. And for us, it is the most powerful tool that we have at our disposal for buying, for selling, trading back to back. However we choose to do it, we use that contract because it attracts, as Piotr says, those people that are committed action takers that have made a decision, worked out their numbers, and they're here to do a deal. And that's for our sense of purpose and our mental health, just being able to go, that's it. We move on quickly.
There's this one deal that we did a few years ago. It was a kind of row of workshops that we got planning permission for, and we bought it from the auction, and we planned to get the planning and then sell it on. And one of our business partners in that deal, he said, why don't we go with local commercial agents before we go to the auction? And I'm like, okay, let's give it a go. And they like marketed for like 6 weeks. They got us some offers, and then nothing happened with those offers. And we're like, okay, 6 weeks is enough to the auction. And literally in that auction, the most amazing thing is like we only had one person that was very committed, and because of this deadline and this kind of competition or the effect of like, oh, someone else might get this property, he was like, okay, I want to buy it, and he placed a bid. He won the property, 10% deposit. 4 weeks later, all the rest of the money, and we got the same amount of money than we would get with the commercial agent with zero aggravation.
You skip past a lot of the fun though. We bought it for 212 out of Harman Healy auctions on a 7 and a bit percent yield. The tenants had been in there for ages. It'd been owned by the same guy / family for 30 plus years. This is the kind of stuff that sits right within our metric of we need to be buying this immediately. And there's several reasons for that. We bought it. We looked at it. We bought numbers 1, 1A, 2, and to 4. Number 5 wasn't being sold, but then number 6 to 9 was being sold on the other side. Number 5 had planning refused, permitted development refused multiple times. So, and we thought to ourselves, actually, our bit being on the end has a slight kind of frontage to the road where you could store bins and do things like that. So number 5 had its planning and prior approval refused because it didn't have storage for bins.
Yeah, but you've got the end.
We've got the end bit, and it's like a perfect space to do that. So we got the prior approval within months, like
it's
in the
literally
timeline.
56 days.
56 days.
To a day.
To a day. And it was, so bear in mind, we bought it for 212. It was 7% yield. And
we had finance, like private finance, at 7% as well. So basically, what we got in rent, we were paying in interest. So it wasn't costing us anything.
Yeah.
And we spent £1,500 or 1,800 for the permitted development application, like all planning cost. It was actually the simplest thing ever.
Stamp and legals were next to nothing because it was multi-unit commercial. It
Yeah.
was simple. And then we, as Piotr said, we then sold it. So we bought it pre-COVID in an auction room, a physical room you could walk into,
Good
sit
old-fashioned
down
auction.
and bid and talk to people and network and do all that amazing stuff you don't get the chance to do really today. And then we sold it on an online auction via a company called McHugh Auctions. And we sold it for $650, and we did that within 7 months, and we netted from that pre-tax £450,000.
420.
420.
It's okay.
420. I like that makes so much sense. Yeah, you're right because 420.
And not only that, like the best thing about auctions is like that those times is that you could network with other people, and there was like the other bit of that terrace.
The second part of the parade,
we actually spoke. It was also offered in that auction. We spoke with the winning bidder. We didn't like that one because the leases were longer. It was more of a commercial investment. But we spoke with that guy, and then we helped him do whatever we did with our unit after we sold it for this amount of money. And then he joined our auction buyers club. We helped him sell this. It was like a really good deal as well.
David,
he only made 230,000 from this, but
And since then, because we take an interest in the people that we bought this from, when we bought it from them at 212, they'd made money.
Yeah,
they'd hold it for donkey's years. There was no debt on it. It was basically a building that had costed them nothing in the last 25 years, and generating that 212 was a great result for them.
Yeah.
We had then created value, sold it for 650. It was bought our half and then the other half by the same Irish developer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He went in for secondary planning to open up the loft space because these were going to be mews houses. on the end of this street, they were building 1-bedroom flats that were being sold for like £400,000. We thought, well, a mews house, a freehold mews house, has got to be worth at least one of those.
Yeah.
So you can work the GDV back from that. And it was all conversion work. It wasn't major development. It's just kind of refitting and kitchen and bathroom, etc. And since then, he's gone in for the front and rear kind of mansards to open up that additional floor. So he has full use of that square footage, which added massive value. And it's a beautiful development, I'm told, because from the day that we saw it in the catalogue to this very day, I've still not been to see the site.
Right, okay, which I guess is one of the golden rules, is it?
It's one of, I say
Yeah,
it's
we don't
one of
send Jay, we send me.
Yeah.
Right, okay. That's the golden rule. The golden rule.
What tends to happen is when everything is going absolutely fine and it's just standard kind of like due diligence, Piotr really likes to make himself comfortable with things. I've got a really good brain for just looking at something going, right, I'm comfortable with how that looks and what that can be, blah, blah, blah. If there is a problem, then they send me.
Right.
I'm not talking like I turn up like a heavy with a baseball bat, but if there's a problem that needs to be resolved, dealing with people and talking through things, then I get
That's
released.
that asset management background that you've got, isn't it?
Yeah.
For the family office.
Yeah.
So what you're actually saying there, for that particular development, there was a win for the people who sold it to you. There's a win for you guys in buying it at auction, a win for you guys in selling it at auction, and a win for the people who bought it at auction.
Yeah.
And then reciprocated as well for the person who bought the other lot on the other side.
It was a massively satisfying lot, because we went in with this first planning application that opened up all the possibilities for everyone in that.
Yeah.
In that.
Because the value was trapped in unit number 5, which wasn't for sale. Because unit number 5 told everyone across that little development, there is no planning gain here. And it just wasn't true. It was just the fact that the person who had submitted the applications was the person that owned a unit, not someone who is a planning consultant or an architect that understands the rules, how to put things forward. So you kind of have to. We love failed planning if we're looking at something, because failed planning tells you where they've gone wrong and what the local authority actually wants and needs.
Yeah.
And if it's still viable with what they want and need, you just reapply.
In fact, failed planning is better than a withdrawn application.
Yeah.
Because all pre-planning, pre-ups,
pre-positive,
we hate pre-ups.
yeah, all that
It's
stuff.
like the least committed of all advices ever possible. So if we're going for planning somewhere, we would rather have a refusal that we can then appeal, or we know exact grounds on which something was refused, because then we can address it. And with that unit, when we actually read the refusal, it was refused over and over the same things. And I think the most important thing was that unit 5 was in the middle of the terrace, and basically they measured the distance from that unit to the main road, which was more than 20 meters, and it needed to be less than 20 meters. And we're like, well, clearly there's that unit there, and it's easy to overcome. So,
So that's looking, I mean, obviously auctions, it's interesting you say it's great for people who are looking to sell properties and buy. It's great for lenders as well, because it gives you that certainty. Good old fashioned 28 days from the day that the hammer, the lawyers have to be working, because there's nowhere to hide for anybody when it comes to an auction transaction.
Yeah.
So it's good for us, because it's for a cost of acquisition, it's quick turnaround of funds as well. And you're normally supporting people buying something at a good price.
Yeah, buying and selling as well, because I think we're in the same business, basically. We're in the business of making those...
We're facilitators in the same way that you facilitate
Yeah.
these transactions going forward.
Yeah, you want
Provide
people to earn
liquidity
money.
to things
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
otherwise illiquid and harder to move, or take time to move.
And what you've seen really in the mindset, I think, of the consumer, the people who are buying the properties, is that it used to be, if you would have asked somebody about an auction 10 years ago, they would have said that's where banks sell all the repossessed stock. And that was the headline. But it's far from that, isn't it? As you've just said, and a lot more people now, even just the traditional person who's moving away from a house, are looking at the modern method of auction or whatever it may be as being a viable option to selling property.
Well, I mean, before, as you rightly say, people have said, oh, that's just where all the repossessions are sold. Now, whenever we go and speak somewhere, or we talk to people and say, oh, we're into auction, goes, oh, that's where they sell all the problem properties. So it evolves. It comes into a new iteration every single time.
But I think like auctions are really good for repossessions, because that's provides transparency. That's one of the main reasons why banks come to auctions.
Makes
And
it an
then-
arm's length transaction, which is
Fair price in the room.
Yeah, the same for councils, local authorities and stuff. It just provides transparency. The same with
Bankruptcies, yeah.
probate properties. It does provide transparency where there's like whole family and everyone's kind of arguing or like.
Yeah. The speed at which grief turns to greed is kind of, I don't think scientists can't measure it yet.
Yeah.
It's like, is it faster than the speed of light or sound? No, it's faster than the sound of ka-ching, ka-ching. I don't know how quick that is, but it's quick.
It's that time, isn't it, in between the death and the funeral? I think
Yeah.
that's when people start doing the maths.
Yeah.
That's normally what happens.
Yeah, so like transparency, another thing, and then the speed. So that's why private people sell. They sell for speed. If they value more like getting the money quickly than maximizing the price. Even though in the auction, like you can maximize the price, but you have to take a risk on the reserve price. So speed is important. And another reason that people sell for auction is certainty. Yeah, so people want to have that.
The quality of that exchange contract is just, I've said it at the beginning, it's just unbeatable.
Yeah.
And you find that a lot of sellers that are entering the market aren't the traders. They aren't the corporates like the banks, the receivers, the whoever. It's people who have just been fed up and disenfranchised with estate agency, with sales falling through, with surveys coming back saying they don't like the colour of the wallpaper in the downstairs loo, or whatever the story is. They just like, well, let's just move on. Let's get it sold. And the beauty of auction is and Piotr's right, if you can take a risk on the reserve and the guide is attractive, you create a competitive bidding environment. And everyone always says, oh, I only ever buy before or after the auction. And I do that because I don't want to feel like I'm the person who paid the most money in the room on the day of the auction. Okay, fantastic. So you paid the most money before the auction to get it out the auction, and you're the only one that offered that price. And that price was high enough to induce the vendor out of a competitive bidding environment. Okay, you didn't pay the most. If that makes you feel better. Or you pay by afterwards, and then you're like, okay, well, no one wanted to pay that much, but now I'm paying this much. Is that still too much? And if you take that outside of the auction environment, anyone who buys anything is paying too much for it.
But like the same thing as like why auctions are being used is for problem properties or difficult to value, is because you take that property, it's very difficult to value. You put like a low price on it, guide price and a reserve price, and then you allow a bunch of professionals to look at it and like think, oh, I can do this with this, I can do that with it, and they all compete for like whose idea is best and who can offer the most given what their idea is for the property. And we can see sometimes like one of the flavor of the month or flavor of the recent years is those drive-through coffee shop investments, like Costa Coffee's, Starbucks. Like literally they're just like a container,
kiosk.
a kiosk, and rented at something like £100,000 to Costa or something because it's close to motorway. They generate a lot of income, and they're being sold for like £1 million or say 1.5 million, depends on the yield, but they're based on the yield rather than the actual value of land.
Buying the tenancy, aren't you?
I mean, the one that always gets me is, and we talk about these a lot. You normally see them in BidX1 or Stratton's or something like that. It's the telephone boxes. Bear in mind, these telephone boxes, it's a metal shell. It's just a carcass of a thing painted red. They're iconic. It's part of British Arcana or whatever you want to call it. And the best thing about these things is that they're not even connected to the telecoms anymore. You're buying a telephone box, you cannot make a telephone call in. And people pay 5, 10, 15, 25 grand. There was one in W1C, something like that, sold for like £55,000. But where do people see the value? And then you see these things come back to auction. You know, someone's turned it into a coffee shop, or someone's turned it into a lending library, or someone's put a one of those cardiac defibrillators in there, and you're seeing a lot more of those in and around the place. And then the one that I normally like to see is like little florist. I love that. They've taken like a brutal bit of kind of like architecture. It's just metal and glass, and they've turned it into something normally outside a train station for people to pick up a posy or two.
And that'll be the first phone box that smells nice.
Yeah.
In my lifetime. So what I love listening to all of what we just talked about is that if people do buy one of your 2 books, or sign up to the Auction Buyers Club or whatever, or even watch your YouTube show, you've done it.
Yeah.
You know, you are actual auction traders. You're trading at auctions. Now you're telling us about your successes and what you look for, etc. So when people work with you or look to get that guidance from you, they're getting guidance from people who have not just read your book, but have wrote the book and been there and lived the stories.
Yeah, and it's not like we've just done it once and thought, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
You know, I was at Auction House London for 7 years. I was headhunted by Auction House UK. Did that for 18 months, almost 2 years. Prior to that, I'd been buying and selling at auction on and off in between roles. Piotr pretty much was a London buying agent and was buying properties for clients out of auction 10, 12, 13 years ago. So even if we're doing it for clients, we do it for ourselves. These are still elements of success. I've worked kind of like behind the scenes as well. And it kind of, that gives more of a 360-degree view. And on top of that, even that you've been to one of our Buyers Club events, we had 15, 20 auctioneers turn up. These are people that are just technically competing against each other, but they come into one of our environments, they're friendly, they're talking, the members get to talk to them, they're talking to us, and it's a very open kind of environment that people don't really have access to anymore.
I mean, the Auction Buyers Club, what I really liked about it is it's a room full of people who are doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just a learning program that people there was deals going across the table between people, you know.
That's part of our like interview process when we like speak to people like criteria. People need to have a certain amount of cash and stuff
to be able
in
to
order
transact.
to be able to transact. Like we don't force people to transact, but we need them to be in a position if they find something that's really of interest, really good, they will need to be in a position to make those offers and like go for those things rather than have excuses of like this yet not hit the account or this didn't happen. So we're like really kind of selective about who's coming to our environment so that we can transact. And when we can transact, we get calls from auctioneers saying like this property is offered in the auction tomorrow. We've got very little interest in it, and it's a really good lot. I think one of your guys should buy this. And we're getting those calls because auctioneers know that we're transactional and our buyers can perform. And we can perform as well on certain lots that we find valuable to ourselves. So
that's a great opportunity, isn't it? It's that inside track as well.
Yeah.
Of knowing what's going on. Yeah. So a lot's changed in the auction world. Obviously, you hark back. You're almost romanticised about the in the room auction, when bids would mysteriously bounce off the wall to get things moving and all
ricochet.
That kind of
all of a sudden, it's like 5 bids off the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now they bounce off the cloud.
But there was the people in there who were having conversations outside, inside, and it was people had a destination to go to. Normally a football stadium or a hotel somewhere. We've moved predominantly to an online world now, and we're seeing more and more, certainly in finance and everyday life, technology and AI are taking over. Do you feel that has took away some of the spirit of auction, or do you think it's made it more accessible?
Both. In equal measure, it's made it massively more accessible. The number of people who, in the first instance, were afraid of the auction room. Like, what is the auctioneer doing? There are professionals in there. Is someone going to try and swindle me? All of the fear kind of thing. And then they don't really want to be on the telephone. They don't know how live that situation is. They don't want to do a proxy because they don't know how the bidding is manipulated off of proxies. It isn't, that there are very strict, stringent rules, almost laws around how a proxy is dealt with. So you take the fear out of it. Someone in our buyers club was snorkeling in Spain, came out of the water, 5 minutes later, won a property, goggles back on, back in the water, snorkeling. You really... Okay, you could have done that pre-COVID 2019, but you probably wouldn't have felt comfortable doing it. You can now do that feeling comfortable knowing that is the status quo. But absolutely, do we miss being in the room? Yeah, I mean, the relationships, talking to buyers and sellers, talking to auctioneers, talking to auction staff, getting a real feel. You're touching the pulse of the auction market on the day. You now know if a 3-bedroom house that's been converted into a 5-bed HMO in Derby, you now know it's worth £262,000 with £34,000 worth of income because it just sold at auction. Before then, you have a rough idea on a pound per square foot or what the yield looks like, but the reality now sits in front of you. The transaction has happened. And a lot of the auctioneers that we talk to now, they're starting to grip, everything moves so fast in March 2020, where everyone had to kind of go, okay, now this is how we do business. The estate agents fell by the wayside. A lot of them couldn't really figure out how to make things work. And 2 or 3 months of having your estate agency closed puts your back against the wall. You need to be transacting quite a bit. But the auctioneers found a way to go online, internal pictures, video walkthroughs, floor plans. They made it accessible, easy to register, get on. And in that respect, in that first year, the market increased by 20%, 22%, something like that. And yearly from that has increased in similar stages. They were set in 2019, the auction market was 2% of transactions in the UK. It's now closer to 8%.
Wow.
And that includes the volatility of transactions, or the volume, not the volatility, the volume of transactions that takes place in the modern method of auction. But we know a lot of auctioneers now that are even inviting us and saying, we're going to do like a client afternoon, we're inviting them for lunch, we're just going to network and talk. And we love that because we ran a networking event in London before COVID, what mainly Piotr did. We're invited by a lot of friends in the industry to come and speak at networking events. And I know you're friendly with Manny Chopra at the Titans. We'll speak there. We speak at a couple of others. And we love being around people and talking property. It's a great way to share something that you're passionate about with people that are very receptive to what you have to say. And auctioneers are starting to come alive to the fact that, hey, well, there's no harm having all of our clients in a room talking with each other, If we can facilitate them doing deals, it's still going to come through the auction. Things are still going to happen, and I think that's something that's starting to happen now. But absolutely makes it more approachable. But yeah, there is no real replacing of that room. I miss it. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a bit like everything that changes. Even football, anything can change. You always hark back to the thing that where you had the most excitement.
But that's the kind of thing, like we miss it because we know it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't even know
Never knew
it existed, and now they're like, it's the way to do it.
And some people, when they're doing like not the live stream auctions, but the bidding widget, like the eBay style auctions, they get excited when they see those numbers just going up. They're like, how is this happening? No one's shouting numbers at them. And you get excited by this like build up approaching a crescendo of when it gets sold, and it's exciting still. It's different, but it's nonetheless exciting.
So we're going to have people who's watching or listening to this who perhaps have never done auction before. What are the 3 top tips for them to take away from 2 experts such as yourselves, as well as apart from buy the book?
Yeah. Buy the book, listen to the YouTube
Join
channel,
Hammered.
Join Hammered, all that kind of stuff. I think my 3 tips are, if you're looking at auction, don't try and buy the first property that you like in the first auction that you look at. Measure the market. If auction and the quality of transaction, that kind of thing that you're looking for, that certainty of being able to build your portfolio or trade or flip or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, if the auction route is the way you want to go because you're tired of estate agents, or direct to vendor is just a bunch of vendors winding you up and leading you down a long track for 9 months, you want to transact, don't buy the first thing that you see in the first auction. Understand the rules of the house. Auctioneers do the same job. They do it very differently. If you buy something from Auction House London and then take that same approach to Savills, it's not going to be the same thing. In the same way that you do that with Savills with Barn & Marcus, it's not going to be the same thing. Barn & Marcus with Allsops, it's not going to be the same thing. Allsops with SDL, for instance, they all have their own processes. They all have their own unique way of doing things, and they find that way of doing things by dealing with buyers and sellers all the time. And they all have not different class or categories of buyers or sellers, but they all behave slightly differently. And they built these processes up over years. So if you assume that if I want to bid at Auction House London, I do X, Y, and Z, then you want to buy something from Savills, you have to do A, B, C. It has to be done in their own way. So understanding the rules of the house, do not assume anything. And the third thing I would recommend that anybody do is, for the love of God, read the legal pack. 40% of people that win a property at auction have not only not read the legal pack, but neither has their solicitor. And that's winners. The number of people that bid, it's over 70%. 70% of people that bid but don't win haven't read the legal pack.
Wow.
And we know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. One of my degrees is a law degree. We know what we're doing. And even we pour through that legal pack. And if it's something that we've gone through and gone, right, there's nothing here that puts us off, we still send it over to a solicitor to sign off our thoughts and point out anything that we think we may have missed.
Pre-bid.
Pre-bid, yeah, always. And it actually boggles our mind that some people don't do that. And they don't do it because they're ignorant of the fact that the legal pack is such an important part of the process. Less important with the modern method, but if it's traditional, very, very important. Those are my three.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think of someone like starting in auctions, I would always suggest to like pick a property that you want to buy and just have a dry run with it. Like literally price, like read the legal pack, price it up, see what kind of bidding range you would have for this property, and then see what's going to happen in the auction and how much it went for, and have this kind of dry run of imagining you buying something and actually use the real example of doing things. It makes things more real, and it makes you prepared for the situation that's going to occur in the future where you're actually going to be bidding. So that's number one. Number two is have a subscription to EIG Property Auctions. That's a portal. It's like a right move for property auctions where all auctions are listed. And the most important thing is you can access the history of auctions. And it's important because there are certain properties, especially people who are new to auctions, they can look at it and then they see this property, it's so cheap, it's a 50k house, it's clearly a 500k house, and the people get excited. And if they only would check the street history of auctions on that street, you probably have seen this property a month before, 3 months before. Like probably 30% of properties in the auctions have been offered in the auction before. And I think having that subscription and being able to access the street history, absolutely invaluable, and it saves us hundreds of hours every year of not going to check properties that we know are probably problematic and keep coming back in the auctions. So that's number two. And number three is have a good solicitor and don't save on solicitors. Like I'm a big fan of value for money, but not big fan of overpaying, but at the same time I'm fan of paying for the right things at the right time. And I think with solicitors it's super important, especially if someone's getting bridging finance, getting lenders involved. Having a solicitor that's got their like mind really kind of screwed on and is commercially minded and can find solutions to problems, super important.
And that's very rarely a conveyancer. We have commercial solicitors, and you pay a little bit more, but a conveyancer is very much a process, tick sheet, blah blah blah. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Essential work, but for the reviewing of a legal pack and dealing with lenders and knowing how to, represent you and make sure everything's done properly, it needs a keener mind. So it's normally a commercial solicitor that we use.
Absolutely, it's the lawyer that makes the transaction. Really, if you use in finance.
I would have the fourth one.
So that's seven.
One.
This is
oh my word!
Go for it.
7.
So I think like the money in auctions are in problems, and don't avoid problems. I would actively suggest to seek problems and find ways of solving them, because the money is in properties that people don't want to buy or are scared of buying because of the problems. Like I know tenants that are problem, planning problems, all kind of problems like that. If you find those problems, you find a property that probably no one else wants to buy. If you price up how much it would cost to solve that problem, then you're in for some good profits.
I mean, the one like that always, I don't understand why people don't like it. A house that has Japanese knotweed, yeah, I'll buy it. Love a house with Japanese. You get 150% back the cost of removing the Japanese knotweed.
150% back of the corporation.
And you didn't let me finish my sentence. And as I was going to say, the land remediation. You get that. You get that back as a sideways relief, right?
Yeah.
And that I think is brilliant, especially if you're doing a lot of transactions. The other thing to think of is once that plan is in place, it's mortgageable, it's lendable, and there's services out there, and depending on like how much square foot it covers, the cost isn't that prohibitive, and people just look at it like it's a poison chalice.
And there are lenders who would lend,
and there are lenders
there's like a plan
in place.
Remediation.
Would Roma lend on something like that?
With a remediation plan in
Do
place.
you guys lend on
Absolutely.
Japanese knotweed stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're great opportunities because technically there's nothing really wrong with the building, the property itself. Obviously, you want that remediation plan in place, you want that guarantee, etc. And you get that sideways tax relief back as well. And I think it's just a really good. I don't understand why people are so afraid of it. It's not like it's a legal problem. It's not like it's a structural problem. It's not like it's a bad tenant that isn't paying, or a crummy landlord that isn't doing the proper refurbs and it's falling to pieces. It's a bit of a bush.
Something in the garden you need to
Something
sort
in the
out.
garden.
That's it.
So that's 8 tips. It's half of our book.
Yeah.
I was about to say, so that's the third book live here today. Listen, thanks for what I got from that as well is that we got two people from Howard, and completely different lists from both of you. So that shows the wealth of expertise that is available to people who want to work with you guys. So listen, thanks very much for spending the time with us, and thanks very much for everyone else for sticking with us and watching, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.